One of the reasons that pushed me to put more thought into the topic of SaaS for physical assets and infrastructure is that I was seeing an increasing number of them raising money. But every time I was wondering if they were not doomed to stay niche vertical products. And then the more I analyzed companies in the field, and the more I started to realize that maybe there was a bigger potential behind some of them. Maybe the end game of some of these companies is not to stay a SaaS product that monitors, manages, and optimizes, but ultimately to become the operating system of the asset they manage. But let me explain to you my theory. To understand where I want to go, first, let's visualize the software stack of many traditional electronic hardware devices, such as smartphones or computers. At the core of many electronic devices, you'll find a firmware. It's a specific class of software that provides the low-level control for a device-specific hardware. Usually, the user of the device never interacts directly with the firmware, apart from updating it, but even this operation is sometimes very tedious to do. On top of this firmware, you have the operating system, or the OS. Unlike the firmware, the goal of the OS is to enable users to interact directly with the electronic device. For example, iOS is the OS for iPhones, Windows is an OS for PCs, like Linux too, but an increasing number of electronic devices now provide an OS to their users. Like Tizen OS, which is an operating system for home appliances that Samsung uses for its smart fridges, for example, or Flight OS, which is an operating system for drones. The other role of an operating system is to enable developers to build applications on top of it. In that perspective, we can distinguish native apps which are developed by the OS provider himself from the third-party apps coming from external developers. Thanks to APIs provided by the OS, developers can tap into the data stored on these electronic devices and use their main features to offer additional applications to users. Now that we have covered the different layers of this software onion, let's see how it could be applied to SaaS for physical assets and infrastructure. What I think is super interesting with these companies is that some of them have the potential to become the operating system of the assets they manage. If we go back to the previous graph, instead of a computer, a smartphone, or a smart fridge, you can put any physical asset or piece of infrastructure at the core. For clarity, let's distinguish electronic physical assets, such as telecommunication antennas or manufacturing machines, from the non-electronic ones, such as farming fields or livestock. Most electronic assets have a firmware, while non-electronic ones do not. Some electronic assets provide an OS that users can interact with, but it's not all of them. When it comes to non-electronic assets, there's no operating system available to users. In my model, the SaaS for physical assets that I keep speaking about are basically the applications that enable users to monitor, manage, and optimize their assets. And what I slowly start to believe is that some of these applications have the potential to go down the stack and become the operating system of the assets they monitor/manage. It's maybe far-fetched, but my thinking is that once one of these SaaS products reaches a critical mass of users and manages a lot of physical assets, it could start to build a data and asset moat. By collecting a lot of data and managing many assets, they could potentially become a kind of operating system that would first enable them to build more native applications that go beyond monitoring, managing, and optimizing. And second, to provide APIs to developers who could build third-party applications on top of it. I know, for now it's very theoretical, but let's try to imagine together a concrete scenario, starting with a SaaS that enables a farmer to monitor its fields. At the core of our graph, we find the fields of our farmer. There is no firmware or OS yet. But in the application layer, you have the various SaaS products that enable him to monitor, manage, and optimize its fields and crops. One of these SaaS could start to aggregate an increasing number of data sources. It could be external sources, such as satellite or drone imagery, but also data coming from the farmer's equipment, such as his tractors, and also added sources, such as purpose-built cameras that are increasingly used to monitor crops. Once our SaaS reaches a critical mass of customers and fields, it could then become the de facto operating system of the farmer's fields. It would enable the SaaS to go beyond monitoring and optimization. This SaaS could then build an increasing number of native applications that would enable the farmers to interact directly with its fields. For example, you could imagine that this field OS could notify the farmer when a crop disease starts and then enables him to order the relevant products to cure it with a click of a button, or to water a bit more the different parts of the fields that are too dry. This field OS could also provide APIs to developers who could build third-party applications, such as insurance or fintech apps that would offer financial products specifically tailored to this farmer, or integration with marketplaces that would enable him to book in advance seasonal workers that would come at the right time to help him with the harvest. In my opinion, there's no shortage of ideas here. And just to show you that it's not only happening in my imagination, you can already find a couple of companies in the agtech space that are going toward that direction. That's the case, for example, of Combine, which is an app that aggregates crop data coming from farm management software, farming equipment such as tractors or bean monitoring system, or even from lab tests. Thanks to this data, the app is almost like the financial operating system of farmers. It enables them to manage and sell their stock of grains at the right time. This is what they do at the moment, but it's not far-fetched to think that additional fintech or insurance products could come on top of this core. I took the example of agriculture to illustrate my points, but this movement is happening in plenty of other industries. As a conclusion, I'm increasingly bullish about SaaS for assets and physical infrastructure for all these reasons. Not only this trend fits a broader evolution because we have more and more data sources and software coming together with physical assets, but also I believe that we are only at the beginning of this trend. So there's potentially plenty of great companies that are still to be discovered.